Hello, and thanks for joining me. My name is Hayden Ramsey, and I'm the prevention educator for Power Up Speak Out, which is a program of domestic and sexual violence services serving Carbon and Stillwater counties in Red Lodge, Montana. Domestic and Sexual Violence Services is a 23-year-old community-based organization that serves Carbon and Stillwater counties. We provide support with the criminal justice system, with housing, with any issues that victims, survivors of domestic and sexual assault may find themselves facing as a result of their experiences. As such, our work led us to feel the need to work on prevention in the school system and throughout our community. Thus, Power Up Speak Out was developed in 2014 as a toolkit to help in prevention services. In addition to Power Up Speak Out, we seek to continually educate our community in the form of various seminars, community programs, and a robust volunteer opportunities to help people understand the cycle of violence and how we can best establish a culture of respect, not just throughout our service area, but throughout the entire country. A little bit about why prevention education is so important. So when I'm talking about prevention education, I'm speaking specifically about healthy relationships, teaching kids and adults for that matter, what to do instead of what not to do, as well as understanding consent and boundaries. So why is this important? Prevention, in addition to resiliency. Things are going to happen in life. Everyone will experience some form of trauma throughout their lifetime. Resiliency is essential for all of us as a key concept to understand as we navigate our way through the world. However, prevention and preventing the situations that can be extremely traumatic through talking with kids and adults about what healthy relationships are and look like in our lives is a much easier route than consistently having to expect people to be resilient. Resiliency alone cannot see us through. The human brain cannot exist in fight, flight, or freeze response. Kids will get messages from the media, friends, and internet well beyond our control. If we don't talk to kids about healthy relationships, boundaries, and consent, and other issues that come with these topics, they will get information. It just won't be from an informed and caring adult. It might be from someone through a gaming console or a YouTube wormhole or anywhere else that they might seek information, especially in our continually online world. Healthy relationships may not be modeled at home. In a perfect world, it would be easy for us to imagine that every student we encounter has a home life that's robust and healthy and engaging, but I think the majority of us know that that is simply not the case. If healthy isn't modeled at home, their reality becomes such that love is equated with less than healthy or even abusive situations. Teaching healthy relationships and core concepts in the school environment is completely appropriate because they just may not have access to it outside of our structured environment at school. And all humans need connection, but we also need to understand how to foster that connection and care for ourselves. Throughout my time doing prevention education work, I can't tell you the countless times that I've been talking with adults about what I do and explaining to them how I teach kids about healthy relationships and our healthy relationship statements. And they're aghast at the fact that no one ever told them throughout the entire course of their lives, not only that everyone deserves healthy relationships, including them, but also what healthy relationships look like and how we can judge or look for red flags to view if our relationships are healthy or not. Everyone needs this education, and it's up to us to teach it. So what about when? It is our view that every developmental stage is an opportunity to include age-appropriate conversations about healthy relationships, boundaries, and consent. The lessons that we provide for, say, a kindergartner are not going to look the same as the lessons that we provide for a sophomore in high school, but the concepts are in fact the same. Having that repetition throughout a student's entire learning experience can also just drive home the points and make sure that they become as important as the ABCs. A critical understanding of these lessons will serve you throughout your entire life. The healthy relationship statements, which we will view in a moment, are adaptable for many types of learners and lessons. Today, as we go through this presentation, I will give you some concrete examples of the way that the statements can be used for different stages of different developmental stages. Growing in our relationships is a lifelong endeavor. As I said earlier, these healthy relationship statements will have just as much weight when people are adults as they do when they're children. However, we know that starting prevention education early is the best route, because once something becomes ingrained in us, it's much easier to pull on as a kind of muscle memory. So Power Up, Speak Out is a 5-lesson toolkit that we designed to help educators and parents guide middle-aged school children through healthy relationships, boundaries and consent, and engaging and collaborative format. I will have more resources available for how you can learn more about this specific toolkit. It is aimed at middle schoolers. However, there are core concepts that can be extrapolated and used to talk to all kids and adults. Those relationship statements and that material is available on our website, and it will be heavily presented throughout this presentation. And here they are, our healthy relationship statements. In my relationships, I get to be myself. In my relationships, I treat others well. In my relationships, I can say no. In my relationships, I have fun. As you can see, they're very simple statements, but when you start to think about what they truly mean in our interpersonal relationships, you can kind of see how they are useful even for adults when we look at our relationships to determine if they're healthy or unhealthy. So we'll start with kind of our youngest age range that educators might be working with. Preschool to 2nd grade, so our younger kids. A lot of people think that prevention education wouldn't necessarily have a place with this age range, but I guarantee you that it does. Not just for understanding, as you can see on the slide, I can be myself and I can say no, but also for concepts such as I treat others well. So books and art projects are a great way to display the 2 relationship statements. I get to be myself and I can say no. This age is also ideal for instilling confidence and autonomy, but also the concept of sharing as seen through I treat others well. So part of what's super important in this age range about teaching that bodily autonomy in the form of I can say no, or I get to be myself, is alerting children that they have the right to speak up for themselves when things don't feel right, when they're in a situation where they are not getting to make choices about their own body. Studies have shown that children who have access to understanding bodily autonomy in the form of being able to say no to adults or to talk to a trusted adult when something doesn't feel right, disclosure rates of sexual abuse go through the roof. And that's not to say that every kid is going to be sexually abused by any means. However, making sure that kids have the language to talk about these concepts in an age-appropriate way alerts us to when there could be a problem or something needs to be looked at. That's part of why this is so important. So the way that we tackle this age range through Power Up, Speak Out, we work a lot with our local Boys and Girls Club and also our elementary school. We have found that books are a great way to talk to kids about these concepts. They love a good story, and the wealth of just absolutely phenomenal children's literature that's available right now is, I mean, unforeseen. It's wonderful how many great books we have coming out talking about these things. I Am Every Good Thing is one such example. So we use this with our local Boys and Girls Club. We targeted this as a 1st grader activity. We read the book to the students, and it takes the reader through all of the magical personality traits of one young boy and ends with the line, I am worthy to be loved. So here we're teaching self-acceptance, celebration, and fun. So this young man, and it's got beautiful, beautiful illustrations throughout the book. He's just celebrating all aspects of his personality. In this case, the use of a Black boy, especially being seen by society in so many ways as either not being childlike, being viewed as an adult at too young of an age, or being viewed as quote unquote bad, is especially uplifting to view this young man so proud to be himself. So we read this story with kids and we talked about how each and every single one of us has special characteristics and traits that make us unique and make us worthy of love. We then took the students through this simple worksheet. My slide cut it off, but at the bottom of the worksheet is I am worthy to be loved. So repetition of that statement. So most of our kids couldn't fill this out completely on their own. They needed a little assistance writing out their different personality traits. We would get their name and just have them come up with things about themselves that they appreciated or that others appreciated or things that they simply enjoyed. So I am fun, I am a brother, I am spontaneous. They probably didn't say that one, but you can kind of understand the gist of it. We had them name off the parts of their personality they were the most proud of. And at the bottom reminded them that they were all loved. Then we used a digital camera to take pictures of each student. And we gave them an opportunity to do a few poses without too much prompting. Kids at this age love to have their picture taken, so it was a fun part of the assignment. We took those pictures and we printed them all off in black and white. The next day, this is kind of a 2-day project, or no, that same day, I'm sorry. We had the kids take crayons or an oil-based art implement and draw on some, I think we used slightly larger than 8x11 pieces of paper, and just had them put some random doodles and designs on it, and then cover that with watercolor. And then we took salt, so that relief or distressed appearance of the picture that you see to the right is salt that we let dissolve into the design. So just kind of a layered art project, another way for them to have some creativity and create kind of a lasting memory around the project. We typed up their I am statements and cut them into strips as you see displayed, and then used a high quality printer to print out the kids' pictures and pasted them in the middle with all of their I am statements kind of shooting off of them like sunbeams. And each child also, we included in their statements, I am worthy to be loved. So the final art project was something they could take home and showed how proud they were of all the different parts of their personality, that freedom to get to be themselves, and that understanding that they were each and every single one of them worthy of love. So that was an example of an art project. That one was a little bit higher level than I personally usually do. My co-facilitator and my administrator, Libby Johnson, actually developed that activity. This next one is one that I came up with and taught to kindergartners and first graders at our local elementary school. This is a fantastic book called Don't Hug Doug. He doesn't like it. And Doug, who doesn't like hugs unless it's a good night hug from his mom, has a boundary about people hugging him. This teaches consent and bodily autonomy. So this book takes you through all different kinds of situations that Doug might find himself in where people just assume that Doug wants a hug. It happens at school, it happens with his aunties, it happens all the time that people want to either greet Doug with a hug or celebrate something with Doug with a hug, or simply assume that all kids love to be hugged. And I think we all know that's not the case. Always asking for consent to hug someone is something we should all be doing in our lives. I can't tell you how many times I personally have met someone who just says, I'm a hugger, and comes in for a big hug. Doesn't even take the time to say, are you? So this book encourages kids to ask before they just go in and put their hands on another person, even if it's meant in a loving way. So I took this book to our PE classes for kindergartners and first graders, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot of respect for our physical education teachers. I think that was the first lesson I learned. They're amazing because kids all of a sudden go to PE and have so much energy to get out. But they were very, very kind to me and understanding that this nice new lady didn't have the same games as their normal teacher. I read the book to the kids, and by the end of it, they were all chanting with me, "But don't hug Doug, he doesn't like it," which was really sweet. The message was, the book is a little repetitive, of course, as all children's books tend to be, but they definitely got the message. And then we talked about different ways that you can greet people that don't maybe involve giving them a hug, and always asking what kind of greeting someone might like. We came up with a high five, a dance, a hug if they wanted it. So the dance would be something where you didn't even have to, in any way, shape, or form, touch their body. You would just both dance. And then the high five, of course, and hug are self-explanatory. So we've started a game where everybody spread all throughout the gym. And I started, and I went up to the first child and I said, "How would you like to be greeted?" And I gave the options: wave, high five, hug, dance, and they got to choose. Whatever they chose, we would do it. And then they were part of my group now. So we'd find the next kid and go up to them. And we both ask them, "How would you like to be greeted?" And so forth, until we'd gone around the entire gym. And by the end of it, a whole, well, not huge, but a 10 kid deep mob was going up to the last child and asking how they'd like to be greeted. By the end of the class, everybody understood asking how someone wanted to be greeted, or asking if you may, in any way, shape, or form, put your hands on someone else, is the way that we do it. It was a really fun game, and I still get high fives from most of the kids every time I see them. So looking at our healthy relationship statements again, before we move on into our next developmental age group. In my relationships, I get to be myself, as we saw with the "I am worthy to be loved" exercise. I treat others well. So consent also involves treating others well. How would you like to be greeted? Doug doesn't like hugs, do you? I can say no, and I have fun. For 3rd through 6th grades, we're continuing to develop the social emotional learning skills, including identifying and understanding emotions. And that's part of that "I get to be myself." So this age, all kids are constantly going through a version of learning about emotions. We start when they're very young with sad phase or happy phase or laughing phase. But 3rd through 6th grade, those emotions can start to come out more in terms of behavioral reactions to situations. So we really want to start to identify emotions within this age group so that they can understand getting to be themselves in a safe manner, and when they need to be them, they get to be themselves, but their behaviors might be affecting others. And then building a healthy friendship model and boundaries in terms of "I can say no." When I tell people I teach kids about healthy relationships, sometimes adults will automatically assume I mean romantic relationships. One of the first things we do in Power Up Speak Out when we talk with middle schoolers is we define relationships. And a relationship is not necessarily a romantic one. It can be any emotional connection or any sort of relationship between 2 or more people. That can be friendships, that can be your parents, you're in relationship with your teacher, you're in relationship with your coach, you're in relationship with the kids you ride on the bus with, at least for the time that you're on the bus with them. So we can see that relationships encompass a lot more than just romantic relationships. All those are important, and we always make sure to talk about those, but we speak about them a little bit differently and in more detail as kids get older. So looking at literature again, still a great way to talk to kids this age. As many of you will know, they will be much more involved in the reading process, trying to jump ahead of you on the page. And also they're capable of doing some reading on their own. My 2 examples here are In My Heart, which is a book of feelings. There's so many great feelings books out there. This one is really fun because you can't see it, but that heart on the outside is actually a relief that goes downward as you read through the feelings. Each page you turn adds to that relief. So it's kind of it's a good one for one-on-one activity, just to kids enjoy seeing the heart form. And then Jojo McCoon's The Used to Be Best Friend. This is probably one of my current favorite readers for this age group. It's something that we do aloud. They're a little bit longer stories, but it is simply a marvelous book. Jojo McCoon's is an Anishinaabe youth, and it even incorporates some Ojibwe language into the book with a pronunciation guide in the back. And she's spunky and very independent, and she talks about all different kinds of friendships. So she has a friendship with her cat. That's her home best friend. And then she has friendships at school, and those are her school number 1 and number 2 best friends. It also talks about her kukum, which is her grandma, and how their relationship works, as well as her relationship with her mother. It is full of all kinds of healthy relationships guidance for kids. And there is a second book in the series, but I haven't gotten it yet. So I think it does a couple really good things. Obviously, it talks about the many different types of relationships that kids can be experiencing in their lives. It's from the kid's perspective, which I think is always a great thing. So it's from Jojo is the narrator of her own story, which is important. And then the fact that it features an Ojibwe heroine is unique. I believe it's the first reader of its kind to have that as its main perspective. For anyone interested in some IFA activities, Jojo McCoon's would be a great opportunity to incorporate some of that into your classroom. So once again, with the Book of Feelings or any feelings book, I have had great success with having kids create their own masks to represent feelings. So as a whole class or group, we talk about what does sad look like. I usually do sad, happy, angry as the 3 big emotions. There's so many more, but those are the 3 that we kind of identify first. And we'll kind of do universal masks on the huge sheet of paper. This is what mad looks like. This is what sad looks like. This is what happy looks like. And then even just on paper plates, I'll have the kids draw 3 masks, versions of themselves when they're experiencing those emotions. So I understand what sad is, but what do you look like when you're sad? And so it gives us an opportunity to talk about, well, we don't all look the same. When I'm sad, I get quiet and my face doesn't change at all. When you're sad, maybe your face is weepy and waily, or I don't know, whatever it might look like. So that whole time, it's just giving us a reason to talk about the different ways that we experience these emotions and how they show up for us in our lives. So as you can see, once again, through both of these examples, just empowering kids to understand that their perspective is important, that their emotions are important, that getting to be themselves is important. Another thing that can start to be pretty useful at this point, I have found, they love a video. One Love Foundation, which is an organization and a set of materials that we utilize quite a bit, is a national nonprofit organization with the goal of ending relationship abuse. This is their quote: "We empower young people with the tools and resources they need to see the signs of healthy and unhealthy relationships and bring life-saving prevention education to their communities." So this is all a free resource. I'm going to just kind of navigate to their website right now. You can go sign up through their education portal, and then you have access to all of their materials. They have great stuff for, I would say, mainly targeted at high schoolers, but they just came out with this Friendlets kind of subgroup of activities. I think there are about 6 videos, and they are a super way to just kind of use a 5-minute conversation to generate, or 5 minutes in the classroom to generate some conversation. I'm going to show you the cafeteria conflict because, as you can see, we're going to learn the difference between healthy and unhealthy friendships.
Let's sit by ourselves. But I haven't seen Echo and Kazu since last week. Can't we just sit with them?
I can't deal with other people right now. You're my best friend, and I just need you to be there for me.
I'm glad we're alone, so no one else has to watch you eat. Ugh, it's gross.
Why don't you go sit with your real friends since you don't care about me? Can we sit by ourselves? I'm not feeling very social.
Sure, but tomorrow, let's sit with Echo and Kazu too.
Definitely. Thanks for hanging with me in my weird mood. You're a good friend.
No worries, but just a heads up, I'm in a crunchy mood today.
And I came prepared.
All right. So once again, that organization is One Love. They also have some great webinars, all kinds of educational content that you can sign up for, and it's all healthy relationships based. So I would encourage you to join them and utilize their resources because they are easy and free. And that is joinonelove.org. So we'll kind of move back here, but videos with that kind of age range I have found work extremely well, and in just a few minutes can spark a whole kind of conversation about friendships and relationships. This age range also loves to talk about what's going on in their lives. So a lot of brother-sister conversations when we talk about relationships, usually in terms of how good or bad their brother or sister may or may not be. It's just a prime time, I think, for all kinds of social emotional learning. A simple prompt can lead to half an hour of conversation. In fact, if anything, it's making sure that people are raising their hands and sharing the time together because kids just have a lot to say. So 6th to 8th grade is when we start to really hone in on the healthy relationship statements. This is also Power Up Speak Out is targeted at this age group. Middle schoolers, as we know, really start to feel the effects of bullying, peer pressure, and just pure conflict. There's a huge physical growth spurt that happens, as well as a hormonal spurt that happens around this age range. So a lot of times kids are not quite understanding their own behavior or why, but that's not to say that they're not capable of understanding that. The more that we can arm anyone, middle schoolers, elementary schoolers, adults, with more information about what's going on, not just within their own physical bodies, but within their emotional development, the better they're going to, the better chance they're going to have at being able to regulate some of their emotions and behavior, and knowledge is power. So just always encouraging, instead of when people reach middle school being like, oh, they're in middle school, everything's offline. I mean, that is somewhat the case, but they're also just, their brain is starting to sort out useful versus not useful information at the same time. So although their hormones might be making their emotions seem unwieldy, it's such a great opportunity to continue to hone in on the things that we do want them to learn and the positive attributes we want them to develop as individuals. So we're going to really focus on clearly defining healthy relationships using real world examples so students can form their own impressions. And we're going to empower students to understand how and when to speak up, form guidelines for talkable adults, and identify them within your school. That last part is super important. We're always telling kids to go talk to someone. Go talk to someone if you need to. Go talk to someone if you see this. Go talk to someone if a friend expresses thoughts of suicide, but we don't necessarily help them identify who is a talkable adult to them. And it's not going to be the same for every kid. For some kids, it might very well be the counselor, which is great. That's our systems working really well. But for others, it may not be. It may be just one single teacher, or it may not be anybody in the school environment, although our goal is to make the school environment full of talkable adults. We can't make a kid view us any particular way. We can just always show up and be honest with them. But it might be their neighbor, or it might be someone that they interact with outside of the school environment. So walking kids through who they can talk to in their life, or a parent or a guardian, of course, always, we want all of them to be talkable adults. But you know, sometimes your parent or guardian is not a talkable adult to you, and it's no one's fault, just part of that developmental stage. But helping kids to understand who in their life they could talk to if they needed to, I think, is important, rather than just saying talk to an adult. We needed to help them identify who they would talk to if anything ever arose. And once again, prevention. So we want to think through who's the talkable person in their life before we get to the point where they might need someone to talk to. So Power Up Speak Out is a 5-lesson toolkit. It's aimed at teaching 7th graders about healthy relationships, boundaries, and consent in an age-appropriate and engaging manner. The lessons are around 45 minutes each and can be done once a week and built on. The core curriculum has the language and activity maps any educator, parent, or caregiver might need to feel confident discussing the material. And then, of course, our healthy relationship statements are to the right there again. And our first lesson that comes in that 5-lesson toolkit is available free to anyone who wants it. I'll include our website information at the end so that you can kind of get an idea of what the curriculum looks like. But once again, our healthy relationship statements are first and foremost. In my relationships, I get to be myself, I treat others well, I can say no, and I have fun. So just to kind of speak a little bit more specifically about what we're talking about as the curriculum kind of shifts as we get into this middle school age range, let's explore consent. So a lot of times educators and parents kind of get stuck on a few different questions. So I included some here. One of them is, how do I explain consent if there is no sex education? As we know, throughout the state, sex education can look very different from district to district and even from classroom to classroom within a district. What do I do if a child discloses abuse? A lot of times people do get somewhat terrified that they might have to deal with a disclosure of abuse. And that's completely understandable because abuse is unimaginable to many people, as it well should be, but we don't want being scared of having the conversation to stop us from having it. And does everyone always need consent? I think a lot of adults get hung up on this one. So my quick answers to these questions. Consent is present in almost all of our daily interactions. As kids receive whatever form of sex education awareness their school or home provides, they will naturally attach the concept of consent to sex if they already do so for all forms of physical contact with others. As I kind of exemplified with the Don't Hug Doug book, if we're talking to kids about this being your body and it being your choice, whether you want to hug someone or just do a high five, teaching that consent at a very young age, they will understand what consent is. You will, we are always going to tell people, of course, consent applies to sex, but they're already going to have grown up in a culture of respect for others and for the bodily autonomy of others. And so they are just going to understand all the more fully that, of course, these concepts apply to sex. Nothing in Power Up, Speak Out is sex education. Let me say that first and foremost. And in fact, the majority of the prevention tools that you will find out there, like One Love and their curriculum, it's not meant to be sex education. It's all approved to go into any sort of school environment, no matter what the sex education awareness in that district looks like. I will say that sex education and the more awareness we can give kids and young adults, all the better. Because talking to somebody about rape, if they don't understand what sex is you're going from A to Z. And we always want to be modeling the healthiest behaviors possible. So in order to create a culture of respect, we have to be informing our young people about their bodies. What do I do if a child discloses abuse? It's never easy, but we must act supportive and listen without shock, shame, disbelief, or judgment. Always let a child know you will need to make a report and consult your school's policy on mandated reporting. I work a lot in training adults to man a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week helpline here that serves Carbon and Stillwater County. And I can tell you that teaching empathetic listening to hear some of the worst and most unimaginable things for most people and how to react to them in an empathetic way without judgment or shock is difficult enough when you're talking about adults. When you're talking about situations that our youth and children might find themselves in, it is extremely difficult. And I just ask you to have a lot of patience and love for yourself if you're having to experience these conversations, and know that as long as you are being supportive, as long as you are being or there for that child, there is no wrong. However, it is best if you, especially if you're the first one that a child discloses to really try and keep yourself and your feelings out of it. These are shocking situations. They are the most unimaginable things that we could hear. But if we give a child an impression that what they've disclosed has made us uncomfortable, or that we don't believe them, the chances of that child going on to feel confident making any more disclosures or seeing that report through decrease dramatically. So we want to listen without shock, shame, disbelief, or judgment. Each school is going to have a slightly different policy on mandated reporting. I think that everyone should have a conversation at the beginning of the year, no matter elementary, middle, high school, small one-room school, where it's all the same. You should just be sure that everyone's on the same page when it comes to mandated reporting. I know some administrators prefer to be the one to make the call, and some prefer that the person who received the disclosure make the call. Just go over it at the beginning of every year, be crystal clear about it, and offer your educators support, or be a support for other educators within your district, because these situations are extremely challenging. They also don't go away after the disclosure. The making the report isn't the last step. That child will very likely continue to be in your school and under your care. So if you ever have any questions about how to see a child through that reporting process, or just be there for them as a concerned adult in their life, please feel free to contact my organization. I will provide the information at the end of the presentation. And the last one, does everyone always need consent? Yes, consent is for everyone, old and young alike. As we create a culture of respect, we must be the models. How would you like to be greeted? I'm a hugger. May I hug you? May I take your hand across the street? We all need consent. So this is another one of our posters, and I apologize for this horrible picture, but I did not have a PDF copy of it for some reason. And this is our consent poster. So there are 5 posters that we also include in our toolkit that can go up in your classroom, that kind of just talk about our core concepts. And this is the one for consent. So consent is an active process between 2 people. Consent is activity specific. Consent can be taken back at any time. And consent must be given in a free and clear mindset. Once again, this particular poster is aimed at middle schoolers. I would say from middle school on up, this poster is appropriate for any classroom. Consent can happen in all different sorts of situations, not necessarily only sexual situations. This is directly pulled from our lesson 4, consent in relationships. It's just one of the activities. So as you can see, it's a 5-minute activity. And this is kind of what our lessons look like. There's the teacher tip. Our definition of consent applies to all manner of activities. Through this lesson, we help students understand the logic of consent, something they already practice all the time with a wide range of activities. This baseline of understanding consent can be built on to understand complex subjects such as sexual harassment or assault. So it's the ball catch activity. I do this with folks all the time, adults included. And it just requires some wiffle balls is what we use, because they're pretty inexpensive and they're fun. We pair everybody up. We give each pair a ball. We ask the pair to step about 4 to 6 feet apart. And we just ask the students to start playing catch, toss the ball back and forth. We let that go on for about 30 seconds. And then we tell everybody to stop. One person hold your ball. Look around the room. How do you know your partner is ready to play catch? The kids may say things such as, they look at me, they said, I'm ready. They said, throw it here. They pointed to where they wanted it to go. They leaned forward. All examples of knowing your partner, letting you know they're ready to play catch. How would you know if your partner wasn't ready to catch the ball? They act shocked or surprised. They didn't catch it. They were looking away. If your partner didn't give you any nonverbal clues, how could you find out if they were ready to play catch? I would ask them if they were ready. If I were to throw the ball at someone when they weren't ready for it, could they get hurt? Yes. So then the lesson being, there are 2 forms of consent, verbal and nonverbal. Asking for verbal consent is a very safe and clear way to learn if someone is agreeing to participate in an activity. We ask for consent all the time. It applies to most actions that involve 2 or more people. We use it when we are playing catch, sharing food, posting photos on social media, holding hands, and much more. So just an example taken straight from our curriculum about how we teach consent. I can tell you this is a very useful exercise. It might seem pretty simple, but especially when I kind of teach adults about consent and they're a little bit more likely to have some pushback. Well, do you always have to ask someone if you're going to, if you can kiss them, do you always have to ask? I mean, it's not really romantic. The ball catch activity is a really simple way to show why consent is important, because if you don't ask, you might hit somebody in the head with a wiffle ball. So now moving on to our high schoolers. High school is the oldest age that I'm going to talk about, other than my kind of little anecdotal stories about working with adults. Although I think obviously college age is a great time for prevention education. It's a little bit beyond the scope of what we do here. There are One Love is actually a great resource for all kind of information about that developmental age. Remember, your brain doesn't fully form until, or doesn't stop growing and forming until you're about 25, 26. So view adolescent behavior as just that until, in their almost later 20s. But here we're going to talk about high schoolers. Personally, one of my favorite groups to work with. Using the healthy relationship statements, but broadening the scope. I Get to Be Myself becomes a lesson on body positivity and social media. Helping students to take relationship red flags seriously and practice speaking up for themselves and others. Giving them the neuroscience behind our developmental behaviors. So our high school curriculum here at Domestic and Sexual Violence Services has really developed pretty in the last couple of years, I'd say. Libby Johnson started it, and then we've really expanded it, and we've got kind of an 11 lesson just PowerPoints and activities that we go in the schools and do. We are hoping to really expand in the next year. So we do that by the health enhancement teachers kind of give us 2 Wednesdays a month, or as many as they're willing, to be quite honest. And we go in and we talk about healthy relationships, consent, and boundaries, but we dive deeper into what these issues look like for teens and in their lives. We talk about love, we talk about breaking up and breakup safety plans, we talk about sexual assault, we talk about Title IX. I mean, we just really go in and give them the space to ask the questions that they definitely have. Plus, as a domestic and sexual violence community-based organization, it puts a face to who they can talk to if they need to. So our organization getting into the schools, I think, is exceptionally beneficial. We are outside of the schools, so we are not school counselors, we're separate. We have a high level of confidentiality, although of course, when we're talking about minors, we're still mandated reporters. So if you have an organization like mine in your area, I would really recommend forming a relationship with them. Not only do we have the real world experience of dealing with victim survivors, I think it's a natural connection and can really help provide your students with the opportunity to handle some of these things that I wish I didn't have to say it, but they are going through. They are experiencing sexual assault. They are experiencing toxic and or abusive relationships. So we're good to have available in your school. So once again, looking at our healthy relationship statements. In my relationship, I get to be myself. I treat others well. I can say no, and I have fun. So we'll use the example of consent since we were using it with our middle schoolers. When we're talking about high schoolers, this age group will directly link consent to sex. I mean, you should still say it, but when you talk about consent, they are going to think about physical intimacy with romantic partners. Consent online and via shared images should also be discussed. I included this link here. If you look at the link, it's basically commonsense.org/education. It's a great resource. Once again, this is a free online resource. It has lesson plans, not just for high school age. It has lesson plans for, I think it's probably around elementary when they get started. And it's just talking about media, social media, online, television, film, all of it, and how it relates to our lives and healthy relationships, how to navigate the internet safely. And it does so through the lens of, for lack of a better way to say it, people who are much more hip than any one of us individually could be. So they keep up with all of the current media trends, social media trends, and have information available for kids about how to navigate them. Super useful. I'll tell you that tech abuse in general is something that's on the rise. It's just another extension of how abusive relationships or abusers can find access to their victims. And the difficult thing is, in order for any of us to be experts, we would have to spend all of our waking hours trying to understand the various ways that tech has infiltrated our lives. It's really difficult. But if you understand how power and control can be used over others, and then can point people to a resource such as commonsense.org/education, they can access the materials and educate themselves about how to best engage with technology. Taking technology away from kids, or adults for that matter, is not the solution. Technology is here, it's not going anywhere. It's an educational resource. During the pandemic, we all discovered what a great outlet and social resource it was. So just taking their devices away is not going to be the greatest response. Commonsense.org will give you some ideas of how the interplay of technology can be used for successful partnership with your kids and with your high schoolers. So also, talking about rape and sexual assault does not cause it. Talking about drugs and alcohol does not endorse their use. Remember, kids are going to get their information from somewhere. It's better that it's from you, an informed adult. So this is a video that we show to our high school aged kids. I also use it in my volunteer trainings with adults as well. And if the ball activity was the most basic form of understanding consent, this video does a pretty good job of driving it home. This is available, it's Tea and Consent. There's a whole series of them, and anyone can use them because you'll see, it's just really well done.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure." Then you can make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware that they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important bit, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you're entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say, "No, thank you," then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, "Yes, please, that's kind of you." And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind, and you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea, and they can't answer the question, "Do you want tea?" because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea, and they said yes, but in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down, make sure the unconscious person is safe, and this is the important part again, don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they are safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it, going, "But you wanted tea last week," or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, "But you wanted tea last night." If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you are able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to make myself a cup of tea.
All right, so Yes, the T in consent video. There is a more R-rated version of this. It has one curse word, but it is the biggest curse word in it. So if you do decide to use this as a resource, especially in your classroom, make sure that you are getting the, I think it says clean version in parentheses. But yeah, it says kind of it all, and it provides a lot of opportunities to have discussion about alcohol and drug use and consent, which I know is a hard one to have with teens, and it's a hard one even for some adults to understand. It takes it to the most extreme example of someone being unconscious. However, having a conversation about people who are under the influence of things and their ability to get consent is very, very important from an organization who deals with a lot of survivors of sexual assault. I can tell you that one of the biggest misconceptions is I had a drink or I had a few drinks, and so this is this is what happens. I deserve this, or down to just community or their family not understanding that consent is only consent if freely given. So here's an example from one of our presentations that we do with, we mainly, well, we've actually ended up doing freshmen all the way to seniors, just because a lot of students don't end up getting their health enhancement credit and have to do it as seniors. So it kind of is appropriate for all high schoolers. But we talk a lot about handling rejection. I think it's important for us to talk about how to handle rejection. Everyone's going to be rejected at some point in their life. That can be rejected from asking somebody out on a date. That could be rejected from making it onto a sports team. That could be rejection from not getting a job that you want. Handling rejection is something that we're all going to have to do, but we don't give people the information about how to go about it. In this instance, we're talking specifically about the kind of scenario of asking someone out. If you get turned down after asking someone to hang out, give yourself some serious credit for being brave. And now you know, and can move on and stop worrying about it. Even though rejection hurts, it's important to respect your crush's feelings. No pressure or trying to change their mind. They either like you or they don't. You telling them how intense your feelings are won't change that. It might be tempting to get angry or tell them off or go online and say nasty things about them. Don't. Lean on your family or friends for support. Chances are they've had a similar experience. So we also, when we take them through, we have a whole lesson plan just on breaking up, and we utilize videos from current popular dramas and some from the 90s, because I guess I enjoy the students trying to experience my nostalgia, but like I use my so-called life sometimes as an example of when someone's pushing your boundaries, and just really mixing it up with high schoolers to keep them engaged, I think. But teaching them to handle rejection, we have a breakup worksheet that we do. So we have safety planning for when you're going to break up with someone. And then we also have safety planning for when you get dumped. And they look different, but they both include knowing who in your life can support you. So those talkable adults, again, friends become so important, maybe even more important than the adults in their lives to them from their perspective, to high schoolers. So talking through how to support a friend or which friends can support you best, and just understanding that rejection is a part of life and we're all going to go through it, and it feels really crappy for a while, but if a playlist can get you through it, or maybe lifting some weights or dancing the emotion out in your room, is such a healthier way than texting them a million times about how they're wrong and how they just don't understand and they're going to love you, or going on social media and bashing them, or all the different kind of negative behaviors that can be associated with when we're rejected. It's just a great opportunity, once again, to talk about how different we all are. The playlist thing, someone always says, oh, I make a happy playlist, and it's nothing but, bouncy, dancy songs. And then there's always one person who's, no, when I'm sad, I want to listen to the most depressing music ever and cry. So just a way for kids and teenagers to share how we handle our big feelings, and that it's okay, and we're all okay. It's normal. So that's kind of the end of my presentation today. For more information on curriculum for all ages, I've included a link here to 3rs.org. It is some youth-based advocacy, but also it has curriculum from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade that's standards aligned for sex education curriculum nationwide. So you can find any sort of lesson plan to talk about sex ed, and they're all, I can't even tell you how beautifully developed they are. They're an amazing organization. The reason why I bring it up in this talk is, first of all, like I said, sex ed is important. And so I invite you to explore their curriculum and to have some conversations about how you can better incorporate it into your district. But also they include a lot of material on healthy relationships, because when we talk about sex ed, we're also talking about emotional health, and they're an organization that really understands that. So, and their lesson plans are to a T, like they're well formulated, the times are all right. I've never had one that wasn't explained down to the last period in the sentence. You can still always, of course, alter and change them to fit your classroom, but I think if you need a jumping off point and you have some time to peruse their materials, I would really recommend that you do that. That is 3rs.org. To learn more about implementing Power Up Speak Out, which once again is that 5-lesson toolkit created here in Red Lodge, Montana, you can visit powerupspeakout.org. We just redid our website and it has a contact form on there. If you shoot us an email, we'd be more than happy to speak with you about getting a toolkit into your school, or also doing some school specific programming. If you have a need for something, we're open to working with any and all Montana educators. This is our home state. We love you all, so please contact us. Lastly, to kind of end today, I saw this tweet the other day, and I just thought it was so beautiful and speaks to why we as educators all do what we do. And as you can see, it was a quote tweet. The person said, "Why do you, as an adult, have hope?" And cosmologist Dr. Chanda Prescott-Weinstein, who, if you haven't read her book, The Disordered Universe, it's wonderful, had this response: "Because I practice and I understand that generations behind me cannot afford for me to be hopeless and do nothing. For them to have any chance at a future, I must practice hope." And that's true for all of us. Hope is a practice, and we get to see it every day in the faces of the youth that we work with. And that concludes my presentation today. Once again, this was Power Up Speak Out. It's a program of domestic and sexual violence services serving Carbon and Stillwater County. And my name is Hayden Ramsey. I'm the lead prevention educator here. If you have any questions or concerns, you can contact me at HRAMSEY@D as in dog, S, V as in Victor, S, Montana spelled out, .org. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for everything you do.